Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Connolly. I'm the Garden Center Manager at Weston Nurseries in Chelmsford. I'm also a Mass Certified Horticulturist and a Mass Certified Landscape Professional, past president of Mass Nursery Landscape Association. So I do a lot of talks and presentations. We used to have them all in store and in-house, but now with COVID, obviously, we've been doing this remote thing. And this really has helped to educate many of our customers. And that's one of our focuses, is to educate consumers like yourself, as well as professionals, and use us for our experience. And there's a lot of people at Weston that have a lot of product knowledge and horticultural knowledge. So today's topic is on pruning. We've done this before. It's an important topic because a lot of people are afraid to prune. I always start off the talk saying, pruning is like cutting your hair, and then everybody looks at my head and starts chuckling. So I'm sure you're all chuckling, even though you're on mute. And it is. You cut your hair, and typically it grows back, except for the challenge one here. And if you prune your shrub or your tree and you feel like you did something wrong, more than likely it will grow back. Now, some things grow back faster than others, and the recovery time could be longer than you might want. But at the end of the day, you're not going to kill the plant by trimming it. Today, what I'm going to do is go through a presentation that will hopefully answer pretty much everybody's questions that's already started to pop in the queue. I'm not getting down to the dirty details of a specific plant because there's too many of them, but I am going to get into the details of if this plant is in a family where it's a deciduous tree, then it would be the same for all deciduous trees. It doesn't matter if it's a maple or an oak or a birch tree. Same thing if it was a deciduous shrub, if it's a lilac or a forsythia or a Rose of Sharon, pruning is going to be pretty much the same. So I'm going to go through all that with you right now. Okay, so snow damage is typically something that we see a lot of. You know, the snow damage. Hold on one second. I gotta get rid of this here. Snow damage is something that we see a lot of in the wintertime because of the snow damaging plants. They break, they snap. We get a lot of calls in the springtime. After the snow melts, my branches are split, my branches broke. What do I do? What should I do? Snow damage on evergreens can be a little bit more concerning because their leaves are also add surface area. Deciduous shrubs like the picture on the right, this is an Inchianthus. Once that snow melts, the branches typically bounce back. It's not like you have to worry about it. You know, what you want to do is make sure that branches have a 45-degree angle. When the snow hits that branch, there's less likelihood of it splitting and opening. So preventively, if you can prune the tree or the shrub so that it can take the weight of the snow, you're not going to see that branch cracking. You know, there's all different reasons why a plant's may lose a branch from snow, and that might be because of the poor form, or it could be the way it was reaching towards the sun because it's in more shade, or competition with other plants. But at the end of the day, having that right branching structure will help these plants survive. So will these plants survive? So this was taken in 2019. You can see there's a whole row of them. It's a burning bush. They were flat as can be. And then a few weeks later, the snow melted and they bounced right back. So you can see that the plants are very resilient. They'll bounce back. You don't see that breakage if the snow is doing any kind of residual. It typically melts and the branches bounce back. Birches, because they tend to be a little bit softer, yeah, it does weep, and sometimes they don't bounce back. So here's a tree. Somebody had not really been paying attention to it, didn't really think it needed to be pruned, and the heavy snow caused it to split. Well, it hit the house, and after that, it went through the bedroom window, and literally 15 minutes before this tree came down, there was a person in this room. So it's kind of scary when you think about that. Another thing that can happen with trees is the soil conditions aren't great, and then the tree falls over because of the weight of the snow. So pruning definitely can help thin out the tree so it can support the weight, but the site is also part of the reason why branches may break, trees might fall, and things of that sort. So it's a combination of factors. It's never one thing. What could you have done to prevent this? Maybe hiring an arborist to go in and thin the tree so that there's not as much weight on the top. The other thing is the soil is probably not the greatest, and so the root system couldn't develop. So a healthy soil is going to cause a plant to be a healthy plant. And that's my mantra about making sure you plant the right plant in the right location and making sure the soil is the right type of soil for the plant. So these are the 5 questions that typically need answers for pruning. Who's going to do the pruning? What needs to be pruned? When do you prune it, and where specifically? And then also why? And don't forget how to prune. So I'm going to go through all of these with you on a step-by-step basis. First thing you need to know is what tools do you have and how you select the right tool for the right job. So right over here, we've got hedge shears. That's for cutting hedges. They're not for cutting shrubs. They're not for cutting perennials. They're called hedge shears for cutting hedges. This is a lopper. A lopper is something that is basically a glorified pruner. So here's your hand pruner. Your lopper is going to cut 2-inch size branches. Your hand pruner is going to cut less than 1-inch size or less than that. Then you can get into smaller size pruners depending upon what you're doing. There's saws. There's heavy duty, there's light duty. We sell 3 different brands, good, better, and best. I am a fan of the ARS, which is the Japanese steel. The reason why is it helps, goes back to that Ginso knife commercial back in the 70s where you can cut through a can. Japanese steel is very sharp. ARS tools are very easy to work with, and they also have the ability for longevity with the sharp blades. One thing that I need to do here, Melissa, is I need to
what do we need to do?
I need to show myself. So how do I do that?
I can see you.
Does everybody see me?
Yes, yes.
Are you seeing the slides?
Yes, we can see both.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can see both. Okay. So
Yes.
excellent. I just want to make sure. Thank you, Greg. So this is a pair of bypass pruners. And bypass pruners mean that there's 2 blades that bypass each other. An anvil pruner is when you have an anvil and the blade comes in contact with the anvil. The anvil style pruners are not really good for branches because this side of the branch will get crushed. It won't have a clean cut. Whereas if you use bypass pruners when you're cutting, they cut simultaneously, so you get a nice clean cut on the left side of the branch and the right side of the branch. So for those gardeners out there that have anvil pruners, throw them away. They might be good for cutting rope, but the bypass pruner is the way to go. Okay, so why prune? Here are the reasons why, not in any priority, but most likely you got to prune for these reasons. And you may have plants in your yard and say, I've never pruned them and they look fine. But if you do prune them, you're going to get more from the plant. And the first and foremost is you're going to improve the health of the plant, because what happens is older branches get tired, they don't develop the flowers, they don't do much with the health of the plant. Younger branches are the key to getting more fruit and more flowers on plants that are edibles. So you want to prune the older branches to encourage more younger branches. Control or direct new growth. So sometimes plants are growing branches to the left side of the shrub and you want more growth on the right side. So you're going to be pruning the left side of the plant to encourage more growth on the right side. So it's also shaping the plant, developing it to have a form of a round shape or an upright shape or a spreading shape based on what the plant grows. More importantly, you do want to prune so that you prevent the spread of disease. Any kind of disease on stems should be removed as soon as you see them. Now, there are different diseases. There's leaf diseases and there's stem diseases. A leaf disease is like a sunburn. You wouldn't cut your arm off if you had a sunburn, and a sunburn is similar to a leaf disease. The leaves turn black and spotty, they fall off in the fall, but the plant's stems are still alive. You don't want to start pruning those stems just because of that. a stem disease, yes, it's inside the stem. You want to prune it back and get rid of it because you don't want that disease to spread into the good tissue of the plant. Increasing number and quality of fruit, flowers, and foliage. So when you have a plant that has one branch and it's literally just you have one branch just like that, okay? And you leave it alone, you cut that branch right here, what's gonna happen is you're gonna get one branch that's gonna go here, you're gonna have one branch that's gonna go here. So now if I didn't cut that branch, I'd have one apple. I'm just using that as an example. Because I cut that here, I have one apple here now, two apples. Could be anything, could be tomatoes, fruit, vegetables, whatever. Now, the next year, if I cut the branch here, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna have one here, and one here. So instead of having one the first year, I had two. Now I have three here, four here. And if I do it on the same side here, I'm going to have multiple fruit right here, right here, right here, and right here. So you can see by pruning, you can increase the amount of branches and then the amount of fruit. It's also, pruning is important because it improves air circulation and allows light to reach the inner and lower leaves. When you have a lot of plants that are too close together and you don't get a lot of air circulation, a lot more disease problems. All right, how do I get rid of this here? Look at that.
Oh. Hi.
Hi.
You got rid of your whole thing. Did you mean?
I know, I'm not that good right now. Hold on, folks. There we go.
You're doing fine.
Yeah. Okay, so I got rid of my art too, so that's good. So why prune? You want to prune to correct weak or narrow crotches in the tree. If there's a double leader, you got to remove one of them and keep the stronger one so that way you don't have this type of thing happening. Pruning is also a popular practice for introducing different shapes like spirals and topiaries or an espalier, or sometimes like with a birch tree or a shrub that has interesting bark, you might want to prune some of the top of the plants up to the top so you can see the lower branches and see that exfoliating bark or that exfoliating trunk. So maybe you're grazing branches to plant understory perennials or ground covers and they need the branches are too low to the ground. Okay, when to prune? Anytime you have a dead branch, you got to prune that immediately. It doesn't matter if it's got flowers on it. Well, it wouldn't have flowers if it's dead, but if it doesn't matter. Whenever you see a dead branch, it needs to be removed immediately. So deciduous trees, you want to prune every deciduous tree for the most part. It doesn't matter what it is, except for maybe walnut, birch, and maple, and I'll explain that in a second. Anytime before the leaves open up. So every tree, as I drive around, has not leafed out yet. So you could go through and prune any one of your trees in your yard. It doesn't matter if it's an oak, a maple, a birch, whatever. You could prune those now. Now, the reason why you don't want to prune walnut, birch, and maple too early is they are heavy sap producers. So for instance, right now, they're finishing up, for the most part, tapping sugar maples. But back in February and March, they're taking and they're tapping sugar maples for all of that beautiful liquid gold that's coming out of it. And if you're pruning in February and March, you're going to see a lot of that flow of sap. Is it bad? No, it's just extra sugars that are going away. If you have no other reasons because you don't have time or resources and you have to prune that birch or maple, you can certainly do it. Later on in spring is better than early spring. So like now or into May would be better than February and March, or wait till the summertime if that's the case. But any other deciduous tree, it doesn't matter if it's a flowering tree or a non-flowering tree, now's the time to do it, or even, let's say, any time in the winter up to now. Flowering shrubs, anything that produces a flower in the springtime, had formed its flower buds last year, and you want to wait till after it blooms before you prune it. So a lilac has not flowered yet. It will be flowering in 3 weeks. And once it flowers and it finishes, you have 2 to 3 week period on average to prune it after it flowers. A rhododendron will be flowering in 2 or 3 weeks. You can take and wait until after it blooms and then prune it anytime you want 2 to 3 weeks later. These are for plants that are flowering and the springtime. Flowering shrubs that bloom in the summertime, like hydrangeas, spirea, potentilla, some, if not all of them, want to be pruned now because they form their flower buds on their new growth. The exception will be hydrangeas, and I'll talk about hydrangeas in a little bit. I don't want to go down that road because a lot of people have questions about specifically pruning hydrangeas, and I'll get into that. But every other plant besides your ball-shaped hydrangea, including all the other hydrangeas, you want to prune those now because the new growth comes out and they flower on that new growth. But all other shrubs that bloom in the springtime, you don't want to prune them unless you have to resize the plant and you're willing to lose the flowers because of that. Evergreens, it doesn't matter if it's a boxwood, a juniper, arborvitae, spruce, you want to try to prune the new growth and only the new growth as possible. And again, prune any dead branches immediately. What should you prune? Any dead branches. So you can see in the middle of summer, this tree has leaves on it and then dead branches. Those dead branches can fall and land on someone or something and hurt them. So it's very important that they get pruned out immediately. Any crossing branches. So you can see in here, there's branches that are growing in the same direction. There's this branch is going here, and this branch is going here, and this branch is going here. That's the right thing. But then there might be ones that are crossing, like, going into each other. Like this one here is coming right through. So you've got to look at any crossing branches and prune them out. Insect damage or diseased wood. So again, if this is a tree that has some diseased wood, prune it out. Branches with tight crotches. So you can see in this diagram here, those branches are very tight. All it takes, and even up here, there's some tight crotches. All it takes is a little bit of snow to hop in there, freeze and thaw, and just push that out. And all of a sudden you have a crotch like this, and it opens up, and it's going to split all the way down. So the question is really that I get asked a lot of times with this picture is, where should I prune it? Should I cut this branch off? Should I cut this branch off and leave this one as the single leader? Should I cut this one off and leave this one and leave this one? It really comes down to what's up top. You have to have a vision of what is the rest of the tree and what it looks like when you start pruning. If I cut this branch right here off, is there anything over to the left side of this tree that's going to take off? Now, maybe there's a branch right off of this branch that's not in the picture that will be over here filling in. But maybe there isn't. And maybe I can prune this one because it's just going to be a better crotch for these two trees to develop, especially as they grow. So you kind of have to look at that. And of course, if you don't prune those crotches, this is what's going to happen when you get that heavy, wet snow. Now, sucker growth is a thing that plants, some more than others, can develop. It's these shoots that sprout off on the trunk, sometimes on the base. You can prune them off and then they keep on coming back. Bonide has a product called Sucker Punch, which is actually a growth hormone. When applied to the tree, it stimulates the tree not to do this. So what you should do is, on the tip of this cap is like a little paintbrush. So what you would do is you cut these branches off and then you would swab it with the Sucker Punch, and that would hopefully prevent it from continuing to sucker up. We get a lot of calls, and in fact, just the other day, a customer called and said, my Japanese maple, the weeping kind, it's split open and it cracked. Can I take this, and I'm looking at the branches over here and they've got life to them. Can I take this right here and push it back together and maybe put some duct tape around it or zip tie it together, and will it heal up and will it come back looking good, is the question that I get a lot. So there's a couple things. As soon as the inside of the tree is exposed and that wood that you see here, microorganisms and bacteria that cause rot are starting to work immediately. And that bacteria starts decaying the wood and moving itself into the base of the tree. It's no different than you having a canker in your tooth, and the tooth doctor said, you know, if you keep that in there, it's just going to go down into your gum, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of problems because of that. It's the same kind of scenario. So what's going to happen is the branch is going to be fine. It's going to grow. It's going to heal on the outside if you tape it up, but inside it's going to start to decompose and die, losing that structure and that integrity. And then it's going to continue to move further down the tree. And then one day, somewhere, it might just all of a sudden die. Or maybe we have another tough winter, and because it lost that structure, it's going to break and snap. But it's now 10 years down the road, and it's a beautiful tree, and you wish you had pruned it. So the way you should do it is you should prune off below this. So I wouldn't prune it here because it's still too close to this. I would either prune it right here. Whoop. How do I go back? Oh, I did it again. Hold on.
You're doing fine. Let me know if you need me.
No. So you would want to prune it right here so that that way you have a nice clean cut and that decay will not move any further in. You could cut it here if you felt like, well, if I cut it here, it's going to be better looking for the tree. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't tape it back up. I think you're just asking for more problems. Okay, so when you have shrubs, it's a three-step process. So I was looking at the chat. There was a person asking about pruning back big rhododendrons because they overgrew. And that's a common question. Like, I have these big plants in front of my house. They're blocking my windows. I want to bring them, size them down. I want to get a plant that I can enjoy. I can look out the windows and all that. So the first thing you have to do is say, okay, is this plant really the right plant for the right location? Because if it's not the right plant for the right location, it will probably grow back to where you cut it, and it will never look great because of the time it takes to recover. And at the same time, when it does come back, it's just not going to be full and fat, and it's not going to have the flowers. So maybe you need to remove the plant and start with a plant that does more for the space that you have. But let's say you're willing to sacrifice the flowers, you're willing to sacrifice the height, and you want it to come back, but not to the same extent, and you're going to maintain it. The first thing you want to do is you want to prune the top. So here's a little thing where we're pruning the top. We're removing about a half to a 2/3 of the height. And then we also want to take and thin out some of the branches. So we want to take out some of those older branches. So we have this plant that looks like this, and then it's going to look like this. And what's going to happen is all the food that's in the roots used to be for all of this. Now what it's going to do is it's just going to explode with growth, and it's going to grow some younger branches from below. It's going to take and grow more branches from here, and they're going to start to grow hopefully in an area where you might want them to. So when you have a branch that is I'll go to that in a second. So deciduous shrubs, when you prune the top every year, all you're doing is just continuing to encourage the growth to form, and it gets very woody at the bottom, and you don't see any flowers, you don't see any growth. So you want to take and thin this plant out so that you can get more flowers to form down at the base. So these are paniculata hydrangeas. In particular, this one is called Quickfire. So Hydrangea Paniculatas are plants that bloom on their new growth. You would prune these at this time of the year. This is pretty much this time of the year, you know, February, March, April, before the spring starts. You want to cut those plants. Okay, this is an azalea right here, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. And you want to cut them back hard, because what's going to happen is it's going to encourage that network of growth. This is the same plant. There's the azalea right there in the summertime. Look at all those flowers. Okay, so you really want to prune those deciduous flowering shrubs that bloom on new growth hard to encourage a lot more growth, a lot more flowers. On evergreens, they're not as forgiving as deciduous shrubs. If you prune these way back because they're too big, you'll look at this for 2 or 3 years. And if you're looking at this for 2 or 3 years, you're looking at a plant that's very unsightly. I would suggest if you have an overgrown evergreen and you have to size it back to something that's smaller, you're better off just digging it up and throwing it away and starting with a new plant. Okay, before you start to prune, you need to create a vision of what you want the future to look like and the growth of the plant to look like. Stand away from the plant and decide what branches need to be removed. So let's say that you have a plant. Here's my plant, okay? That's my tree. And I have no growth over here because it's leaning this way. It's leaning towards the sun. There's not enough sunlight on this side of the plant, and that's why it's leaning that way. I don't care how much pruning you do, the sun is the reason why the tree or shrub is growing that way. And in order for this plant to actually grow more growth on this side is to get more sun over here. And if that's because over on the side, there's some big maple trees that are shading it out, well, maybe you have to thin out those maples. But at the end of the day, if you can't get any sun on the backside of this, it's not going to grow. Okay, it just isn't possible. However, if you have a tree and you have one branch this way, one branch that way, and one branch that way, if I cut this plant right here, what's going to happen is that branch is gone, and I'm taking the food that went to this branch, and it's going to encourage it to go on this side. And so I'm going to get all the growth growing on this side. If I cut this branch right here, I'm going to encourage the growth to go on this side of the tree. So yeah, maybe on this tree here, if I want to get more growth this way, and I had a branch going this way and that way, if I cut it right here, I'm going to see maybe that branch try to grow that way, but more than likely it's going to go like this and it's going to go like that, just because of the sunlight. Okay? So this is all rotted here. CODIT is an acronym for compartmentalization of decay in trees. And there's a professor out of UNH called Dr. Alex Shigo that came up with this philosophy back in the 60s and 70s. He did some research and he found out that there's a part of the tree called the branch collar, and there's an area right in here where the tree has some, for lack of a better word, chemicals that wall off bacteria and decay. If you prune this tree just above the branch collar with this is called a ridge right here, so it's almost perpendicular to a mirror image of the ridge. You keep this collar intact, you're actually going to see the tree heal over much better, much more efficiently, and you do not need to do anything more. You don't need to spray anything on it. It will just do it on its own. So birch shows the bark ridge really easily. So there's the bark ridge. Here's the collar right there. Okay. So all you want to do is cut it right here. You don't want to cut it flush, because if I cut it flush, I'm going to lose that area where it creates that wall. Always and every time you're pruning any kind of a tree, even a small tree, you want to take the weight off the branch first and then make a nice cut. And it's true maybe of shrubs. If I had a big lilac that I wanted to cut back, I wouldn't just cut the stem that's 6 foot tall at the base. I would probably cut it in half and then cut it down so I have a nice clean cut. Again, keeping that bark ridge and collar in place. So right there, you can see there's that collar intact. You can see that callus tissue just healing over nicely. And if you cut it flush and you remove that collar, which happened right here, see it started to rot. And once that rot starts there, it's going to continue to mobilize itself into the tree and further into the center of the tree and down and up. So then you're going to have some problems with the possibility of that tree snapping. It doesn't matter what size branch, that callus tissue will form, and it just takes time for a bigger branch. Don't forget to use the right tool. If you are cutting diseased branches, you want to sterilize the diseased blades so that way you don't have the disease spreading from the bad parts of the tree or shrub to the good parts. Sometimes trees and shrubs get, more specifically trees, get bark damage, specifically frost cracks happens to be more visible at this time of the year. It's a split that happens along the trunk that is developed because the sun is setting low to the earth, warming up that west side of the trunk, and then at night it gets cold and it just cracks and splits. It's not a disease, it's not an insect, and it will callus over. It's just like when you get your hands get cracked in the wintertime from the different temperatures. Mechanical injury can happen with like a weed whacker or a lawnmower hitting a tree. When you have any kind of mechanical injury, what you want to do is take a sharp knife and create like an elliptical oval shape, and that will form that callus tissue much cleaner and easier, so you don't need to see it. Cankers, like we have cankers in our mouth, trees get cankers. It's usually a spread by disease, and it engulfs the inside of the tree, and it starts to rot the inside of the tree. So here you go. This is what a canker looks like. And the only solution for this is to cut it down. And, you know, the tree may have leaves on it and it may flower, maybe not as much as it did, but, you know, it's not a healthy plant. So, you know, it does need to have some kind of remediation. Some cankers could take for years before you start seeing the whole tree needing to be pruned. Okay. Wound dressing is bad. Wound dressing is that spray paint that you would put on the tree after you cut it. You don't need to do that. Fertilizer is something that I do suggest, but it's not necessary. It's not food that's going to all of a sudden miraculously repair the tree and make it grow faster. So most of the tree paints that are made are petroleum based, which are pretty nasty for trees. They do not, what they're supposed to do is seal moisture, and so that's not good. They do not inhibit compartmentalization, so you don't need it. Wound dressings don't prevent or entrance of decay in organisms. They don't stop rot. So it's not really something that I recommend, and most of the old school people use it, but it's not even really out there in the trade anymore. Depending upon the situation, you certainly can fertilize. I always tell customers, if it's a flowering plant that blooms, you want to fertilize it 3 times a year. If it's non-flowering, 2 times a year. So I always try to remember to fertilize around the holidays. So here we are, it's Easter weekend. So yep, early April, get out there and put that first application of fertilizer. Then later in spring, before summer hits on, around Memorial Day, for those flowering plants, fertilize it again. And then half the rate is usually the recommendation around Labor Day. I'm a strong believer in the holly tone for your shrubs and trees, your plant tone for your perennials, grasses. It could be even for shrubs and trees, vegetables. Tree tone would be for your deciduous trees, your fruiting trees, your ornamental trees. We're going to talk quickly about hydrangeas and roses. So hydrangeas, this was a new one coming out this year. It's called Let's Dance Big Band. It's got a pinker flower and a high pH and a more purple flower in a lower pH. It's a macrophylla hydrangea. The macrophyllas have that ball-shaped flower, big heart-shaped leaves. And many of the macrophylla hydrangeas bloom on both old wood and new wood. Now, the older varieties like Vico Blue only blooms on old wood. The newer varieties like this one here called Let's Dance Big Bang and La Summer, as well as many of the other types of hydrangeas, their new growth comes out in May, June, and then the flowers on those come out in July, August. So that's why you might see some periodic blooms on those. Those plants, because they flower on their old wood first off, and you prune that growth in early spring, you're cutting off the potential for flowers. The only thing you could cut off is any old wood that's dead. So if you go over to a branch and it's brittle and it snaps, there's no buds on it, absolutely can be pruned out. Any of the macrophyllas that have dead wood, it would be more noticeable once it leaves out. So come the end of May, beginning of June, you see some sticks with leaves and some sticks without leaves. The sticks without leaves have to be removed because they're not going to do any good. Those sticks with no leaves were alive before the winter, but the winter killed them. And that's why the hydrangea didn't flower. It was the temperatures. So you see all these sticks in here, there's snow around it. Some of these sticks are alive, they have buds on them. So some of these sticks are dead because I can go over to them and snap them and they're dead. Roses are best pruned at this time of the year. You want to prune them back hard so you encourage growth to form at the base. And then you continue to prune roses as they flower throughout the course of the year, so that way you get more stems and more flowers. Roses typically go through a constant leaf cycle, then flowers that form on that leaf cycle, then more leaves, then more flowers, and so on and so forth. So you just want to keep on deadheading and pruning off the dead flowers to encourage more flowers to form. And rule number one is you definitely want to make sure whatever plants you plant them in the right location. I can remember 20 years ago, a customer came in to the garden center and wanted to buy some evergreens to put in front of their house, and they didn't want to spend any money, so they bought something that was inexpensive. They didn't read the label, and they didn't realize they had white pine trees, and they planted them right in front of their house, and they're now 30, 40, 50 feet tall. So you got to put the right plant in the right location and know what the potential height of the plant is, how fast it grows, so that way you don't have, the evergreen blocking the window when you bought it when it was only 18 inches tall. You have to enjoy your yard. So you want to make sure that your landscape is, fulfilled with all the colors and the textures, and you want to make sure you're pruning to encourage all of that. Arborvitaes are a great plant for hedging, but they're not really a good plant for the foundation in front of the house. So keep that in mind when you're planting the right plant for the right location. And sometimes they get like this. They get so big, they get overgrown. You didn't trim it, so it didn't get fuller. And now the snow goes in there, and now that branch is gone. So in a situation like this, you might want to think about tying it together in the wintertime, maybe taking some of the weight on the top of it off. And that will hopefully encourage the plant to produce some more growth and be fuller to withstand some of the punishment of the wintertime. The who question of the, who, what, where, why, I kind of went all over. The who is really important. You need to make sure you're assessing the size and scope. If this is a tree that's much larger than you can handle, you should hire a certified arborist, a certified landscape professional, or a certified horticulturist. If you Google Mass Certified Arborist, Mass Certified Landscape Professional, or Mass Certified Horticulturist, you'll get a directory of members, and you can usually put in like your zip code and find some member that's in the organization. They've taken a test, they've been qualified, and they should know what to do correctly. So you want to reach out to those individuals when you're looking for that work that's beyond your control. Here's my contact information. So right now, we're good to go. We've got questions that need to be answered now. So let's see if we can get those questions up.
All right, are we ready to go on these? This is exciting. All right, so Caleb Rogers says, I have a couple of rhodies in front of my house that have grown way too large for their space. How should I prune them? And is it even possible to prune them successfully?
Okay, so and Caleb, you're welcome to unmute yourself in case you have a question, and that would be true of all of you as we go down the list here. So Caleb, if your rhododendrons are too large and you want to reduce the size, you can certainly do that, but keep in mind that they're going to want to grow back, and they're going to want to flower on that new growth that you are trying to keep the plant down at a certain height with, so you're not going to get the flowers. So if you want your flowers, you're going to want them to grow, and if you don't want them to grow, then maybe it's the wrong plant for that location. You could cut back your rhododendrons, but what I would do is I would cut one or two, say there's 6 or 8 branches coming from the base. Keep 2, maybe 3 of them, cut them back a little bit to where there's still foliage, cut out maybe one or two of them. Next year, those one or two that you cut out may break growth off the base of them and fill in slightly. And then you might want to prune one of those taller ones back. And then the next year after that, that one that you pruned 2 years ago now is really filling in. The one that you pruned back last year is now starting to fill in. And then you got that one large branch that you're going to cut back that third year. But for 4 years, this is what you're looking at. A plant that's pushing out leaves, not really that many flowers. Do you really want to look at that? You know, it's one of those things where it can be managed, but it's not really going to be an attractive plant, in my opinion. Did I answer your question, Caleb?
Absolutely, and that's sort of what I thought. But
Yeah.
We've had them for 30 years, and they were little when we moved in, and
Yeah.
they're big now.
So,
Thank you.
and that is a good question because a lot of people have that same question. You're welcome. Okay, the next question.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah.
Forgive me for 1 second.
I have it here, Melissa, if you want me to say it.
No, that's okay. I like
I
doing
know
it
you
that way.
enjoy this part of the
I do. I
program.
have fun. Okay, Greg. Thank you, by the way, for earlier. And Greg wants some advice on pruning his choked Dutchman's pipe climbing vine. That's a mouthful. He'd also like some advice on pruning his California privet hedge plants.
So pruning the privet hedge, it's a weed. It grows back real quickly. You can prune it anytime. If you want to cut it hard now, it's just going to encourage more younger growth. If you want to thin it out, like I suggested, you're going to encourage more younger growth at the base. You definitely want to keep on top of it. I don't know what you're trying to do with that, Greg. Do you have more information so that I can help you on that?
Yeah, I put them in. I'm trying to create a hedge. And so right now they're maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet tall. And, when I've seen privet hedges, they're really thick and they provide a visual barrier. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to have them be thick and full from the top to the bottom.
So how wide are each one?
Oh, they were in like a 5-quart containers when I bought them. So they're maybe 2-3 feet wide, 2 feet wide. I planted them 24 inches center to center when I put them in the ground.
Are they touching each other right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I would probably cut back about 1 foot off the top, and that will encourage it to fill in. You could thin out a couple of the branches, but I would give it a good heavy haircut. That's going to encourage a lot more growth to form on the top half of the plant.
Okay.
And then on the Dutchman's vine, it's growing too vigorously. So you're concerned that it's choking out other plants?
Yeah, no, not choking itself. So it was, I have it growing up a trellis, and the first several years that I put it in, it just kept growing and expanding, and it's in a place that's heavily shaded, so it never flowers. But I like just looking at the leaves. This past summer, it was so thick that it was, I think when you said circulation earlier, it's like it's choking itself, and so
Yeah.
that it just didn't grow very. It didn't leaf out the way that it did in previous years. I had a friend in Wisconsin who said she recommended that I cut everything from, I measured from 4 feet from the ground, and everything above 4 feet, I just totally lop off. That's what
you could, with any vine, you can cut it almost to the ground, if you will, and it's just going to re-establish itself over a period of time. So yes, you can do that. It's just going to start from square one wherever you cut, 1 foot off the ground, 2 feet off the ground, wherever you want. It's just you're going to lose all that growth that you had for many years. If it's too many branches, I would probably prune out for every 3 branches, take one out, or every 4 branches, take one out, just so that way you have not as many branches there. The other thing that you could do is you could cut back a little bit on the top and then thin out. And hopefully the other reason why I was thinking that it didn't fill in that much, it could be the sunlight. If it's just not getting enough sun, it might be a factor of that more than anything. And trimming may not always solve that problem. It may be just a lack of sun.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Melissa, the message before Greg's was from Paula, and she asked
Skip
about...
one.
Yeah,
Oh,
she
bad
asked how to
name.
do, yeah, that's okay. She asked how to prune a
Wait.
Nishiki willow.
I don't know. Mine starts with me and then Caleb and then Greg.
Oh, I see one. Oh, it's a direct message is mine. So she must,
That's part of the problem. So why
yeah.
don't you go ahead and answer that one? Because if it's
Oh.
not direct, if it's direct, I can't see it, which is kind of the fun thing. Well, technically I can, but I don't like to look at those because you never know what someone's texting. For all of you on here, if you text someone privately, just know the admin can actually see it, although I choose not to.
Okay, so the question is,
that in mind.
That's okay. How do you prune a Nishiki willow to maximize the white leaves? So the white leaves come on new growth. So I would prune it back hard right now, and then it's going to flush out with its new growth, and it's going to have that nice tricolor pink and white and green foliage. And then after that foliage starts to kind of get mottled and it's not showing that intensity, trim it again. And I would trim a good third or a 25%, and then it's going to cause the plant to want to push out that new growth again. And you might even find, because it's a willow, it's fast growing, you may have to do this a third time. So it's not just a one time a year. If you really want that foliage to really be intense, you have to trim it. You do want to make sure that when you're trimming any of your deciduous shrubs that are flowering, I forgot to mention this, don't want to prune any of your flowering shrubs in the springtime after July 15th. If you prune them any later than that, the recovery time for it to set flowers for next year is not good. On deciduous shrubs like this, you could continue to prune, but I would stop around the 1st of August. I wouldn't recommend that you prune middle to end of August to encourage more growth from the plant, because if we have a cold early fall, it could affect that new growth. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next question.
Okay, so, and do you have any other personal questions? Because
the next one is from Maxine. I don't have one after that. I don't see.
Okay,
I'm just going
good.
down the list. So you go.
All right,
go
good.
ahead.
Maxine wants to know if it will kill an ilex. It's about 6 feet high. She takes it back more than a third.
So Maxine, if you cut that plant back a third or even 50%, you will not kill it if there's still foliage where you prune. If you prune the plant and there's no leaves, it's going to be a hard time for that thing to fill back in. So some plants, the top half of the plant is full of growth, and a third down would still maintain some growth. Some plants, the top third is just growth, and you cut it back and there's nothing there to replace it, and it's not going to have anything to recover. So I can't answer that honestly without really assessing how much foliage you have. Do you have any information that could help me elaborate more?
Yeah, the shrub is very old. It's been out there a long time, and it is very thick with foliage. And so I have pruned it up from the bottom a little bit so we could see underneath. And the top part of it, we have pruned back a number of times, but it's so large that in the winter, if we get a heavy snowfall, we actually had one year where it pulled out of the ground.
Oh.
And we had to, I don't know how, my husband in the springtime, we managed to dig behind it and push it back into place.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's a female, and it's very, very happy. Tons of flowers and lots of berries for the birds, but it's just so unwieldy. It's very large.
Yeah, you might want to look at taking and thinning it out a little bit too. Maybe not necessarily cutting it back. I mean, you could cut back, 25%, a third if there's growth, but maybe you take out a couple of stems where you see 4 or 5 stems kind of in the same area. Keep 3 of them and take 2 of them out, and that will help open it up a little bit, and maybe cause that snow not to do the damage that it did before because it was so top heavy.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
right.
Boy, everybody's so polite. This is lovely. Okay. Next question. Please advise how to prune a weeping cherry and a Japanese maple. And can you also potentially give advice on how to prune an indoor begonia?
Sure. So on the indoor begonia, that's simple. You just cut back the leaves, stems to another set of leaves or stems. So if it's very leggy, you can cut it back 4 to 6, 8, 10 inches if it's a very long stem. But you got to make sure you have something behind left to replace what you cut off. If there's no stem, there's no foliage, then there's no point of the plant starting to recover. As far as the weeping cherry is concerned, if you are concerned that it's not that full and you want to get more density from it, you would want to prune it now and sacrifice the flowers to encourage the formation of more flowers for the future. And, you know, it's a nice tree. It blooms in a few weeks and you're going to have beautiful flowers on it. But is it better to enjoy the flowers, or is it more important to enjoy more flowers down the road? And by pruning it now, you're going to encourage all that food that went to flowers to go to that new growth. And then you may end up having time to prune it again sometime in late June, early July, and it will flush again. And then before spring of next year, you might have a fuller plant because of that. Japanese maple, I need to know, is this an upright Japanese maple or a weeping Japanese maple? And what do you want to, why would you want to prune this one?
It's a weeping Japanese maple.
So what's wrong with it? Is it too tall, too wide?
It's too big. So I was thinking, should I prune it or should I not bother?
It's a really expensive plant and you don't want to start pruning it down. You're almost like, you could thin it out. So if there's 5 branches there, you could take 2 of them out. But
Okay.
if your thinking is, oh, this thing is huge, it's beautiful, it's ginormous, and I don't want it to get any bigger, you're not going to be able to keep it small or keep it at that size for the rest of its life. Maybe you hire somebody to transplant it. It's a really expensive plant. So, you know, if it's really looking good, I wouldn't do that, you know.
All right,
Okay.
thanks.
Did I answer your other questions too, Nidhi?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
All right,
right,
on
next
to
question.
the next. Okay. Did you answer Caleb's question about his American yew?
no.
Okay, so Caleb also wants to know, he has an American yew that's tall and wide, and can it be pruned?
So any needle evergreen, a yew, a juniper, arborvitae can be pruned. Right now is fine. If you want to adjust the size, but you want to make sure you're pruning it back to where there's growth. And then it will flush out with some new growth. And then after the new growth comes, if you want to prune that slightly, you could prune a little of it. So let's say that 8 inches come out, or 6 inches come out, you could prune 3 or 4 inches off. You wouldn't want to prune any more than 50%. And then from there, next year, you'll see some more growth. And then over the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully you get a plant that's kind of right it up in the size you want. Did I answer your question, Caleb?
Yep, similar to the Rhodie, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yep.
You're welcome. All right,
Okay.
Les.
I just made my screen bigger so I could read it better.
Roberta.
Roberta would like to know how and when to prune. How do you say that word?
Wygelia.
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 So,
Thank you.
Roberta, can I ask you a question? Roberta, you there? Okay, well, Roberta, my question to you was, if you're looking to size the plant or are you just looking to get it fuller? Because right now it's got flower buds on it to flower this spring. If you keep it and you want to enjoy the flowers, you can prune it after it flowers, and that will encourage the plant to fill in and then it forms flower buds for next year. But if you really want to size it up and get it back to a certain size, I would sacrifice the flowers and prune it back now. And that way it will encourage more young growth to form. But you're going to lose this year's flowers in the process. So I'm not sure which way you want to go with that. Okay, the next question is from Sharon. And she said yes and yes. So I don't know what that means. Sharon Hoskins. Okay.
So I just said yes and yes that I could see both you and your slideshow, but I have another question at the end. You put up your contact information and it was so brief, no one could write it down or take a picture. Could you put it back up again?
I can.
I would
can do
love
that.
for you to come speak to my garden club.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Well, I don't happen to love that because he's using his old card and his new card is really beautiful.
Yeah, that's okay.
And
Here
he's
it
using
is.
his old ugly card and it's making my heart hurt. So
Oh,
Well,
his
there's my
new card is
contact.
beautiful.
There's my contact information. I'll replace this slide next time.
thank
Melissa.
you.
You're welcome.
Bob wanted to tell you hello, Jim.
Okay. Okay, so Christina wants to know, please clarify about pruning potentilla. How far down can you prune? So Christina, a potentilla is a summer blooming plant for those people out there that don't know. You really want to prune this hard. I mean, I have had a 3-foot size potentilla cut back to 12 inches, and it just lushes out with all this new growth, and then the flowers come on it. So there's no problem giving it a really heavy haircut. It could be 2 feet if you wanted to. Keep in mind, wherever you prune it to, that's where it's going to be its starting point, and then it's going to continue to grow from there. So if you want to try to keep it at a 2-foot height and a 2-foot width, you'd cut it back even harder than that. If you want to keep it at 3 by 3, then you wouldn't want to cut it to a foot off the ground, because you're going to lose you're not going to have that size you might want. So we definitely want to prune it now and give it a really strong haircut. And you can cut the new growth and even into the older wood. It's not going to hurt it. Did I answer your question, Christina?
Yes, you did. We've never really cut it down because it all looks dead, really. It's all brown and whatever all the time. So
Yeah.
that's why I was hesitant to do anything, but that helps me a lot. Thank you so much.
Take some before and after pictures. You're going to be looking at this plant in August saying, oh my God, I can't believe how it recovered and how beautiful, and it's not looking as ugly as it was. So
Thank
So
you.
I have a suggestion for all of you who get to prune and bring your trees back to life. You should put a plaque on them and name all the trees Jim. Don't
Thank you,
think?
Molly.
Yeah, because I think a lot of trees named after him is appropriate.
There you go.
So Olivia is next, and we want to know. So I want to know this too. Why do you prune trees with cross branches? Why does that matter?
So when the branches are crossing like this, what happens is you don't have good air circulation, first and foremost, so you could have potential problems. The other thing is they could grow into each other, and then they actually could attach to each other. I've seen that happen, and that's not a strong crotch. And moreover, you get a competition in there, and you're not getting the appropriate branching structure for the support of whatever you're supporting. So let's say it's a fruiting tree. You wouldn't want to have the crossing branches, because once the weight of the fruit happens, it could cause the branches to collapse. And now you got 2 branches going down instead of 1 branch if it was like this, you see? So you want to make sure that everything is free flowing. You don't want to have the branches going in the center. You want the branches coming outside to the tree. Olivia, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next, Nancy. Nancy comes to a lot of these classes. Hi, Nancy. It's nice to see you. Well, not see you, but see your name anyway. Her Hinoki cypress lost its top. Now it's growing sideways. Do you have any advice on how to form the better shape? And can she take off? Oh, how much can she take off at a time on the sides? That would make a very interesting looking tree.
So I'm going to do my drawing thing again, because everybody likes me. So here's the deal, Nancy. That's your cypress, and the top came off right here. So what's going to happen is there's going to be 1 branch that was here, 1 branch that's here, 1 branch that's here, 1 branch that's here. This is the part that was cut off. All of these are going to try to compete to be the new leader. And you've got to decide which one of these 3 is the stronger of the 3 that you want to keep as the leader. So let's say that looking at this, that you feel that this branch on the right is the strongest. So you would actually cut this branch right here off, keep this part, and you would actually take like some tape or a twist tie and kind of lean the branch towards the main trunk and kind of encourage it to form a new leader. You would even, some people have even put like a little stake or some kind of an artificial bamboo stake or support against the trunk to act as the agent to keep that this first stem from going this way to now coming this way. And then the next year, cut that off once it's regained. And so what's going to happen is your new leader is going to look like this. It's going to go, whoop, and it's going to go like that. And that's how you get that new leader to form. Any tree or shrub, perennial, doesn't matter, when you lose the top, it automatically stimulates side growth, and you can't do anything to stop that. It's just inherent in plants. You want to try to encourage that new leader to form, and you're just going to have to trim as much of the sides that you can to get it back in shape over time. So as the new growth comes out this spring, maybe you're giving it just a slight haircut. Next year, you're doing the same thing. The year after, you're doing the same thing. And eventually, you're going to have that shape back. But it's going to take 3 years, maybe 4 years before you're going to have that shape looking the same. Did that answer your question, Nancy?
Yeah, but can you just go over that tying it to go upright again? I was trying to follow it, but that was a little complicated for me.
Was it my drawing? Just kidding.
No, your drawing was fine. I think it was my brain couldn't keep up with it. So if I,
Right, so-
I look at a
So here's
good strong branch-
so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, so you got 3 branches here, okay? And this one here broke off the top, okay? So now, now we have this branch here. It was like this, okay? So we cut this one and I was right here off, okay? And so, and here's a single term. So what we want to do is we want to take this branch and lean it against another branch that's kind of growing upright, so that it's not going to be bending towards the right. It's going to be going straight up. And eventually you're going to release that, that branch. So it's almost like a broken bone that you're creating a splint, so that you can encourage that branch to kind of grow in that direction. And once it gets thicker, it will support the weight on its own. And you remove that stake and that tape and all that. You don't want to leave it on permanently. But the goal is that you want to have that branch that's going to start coming up, the main leader, and then where you kept that branch, it's just going to look like this. It's just going to, it's not going to be perfect. But from the outside of the plant, you're not going to see that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's going to be all nice and full.
Right. Okay, I think I got it now. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay. I have a mature ornamental pear tree that has a few suckers several feet away from the tree. I keep cutting them down, but they keep returning. Should I take an axe and cut off this large sucker?
Well, that product that I mentioned, that sucker punch, is definitely going to help stop the suckering. So if the pear is doing that, you would want to prune it off and then apply that sucker punch to the fresh cut. And that should stop it. An axe I don't think would be necessary, but just a pruning saw or a pair of loppers, depending upon the diameter of the trunk, to make a clean cut. Okay. Keep in mind that the reason why plants are suckering is that they're unhappy. It's a symptom. It's a sign that the tree is not healthy. Now, you might look at the tree and say, oh, it's got beautiful flowers. It looks great. Its leaves are great. How can you say it's not healthy? Inherently, plants want to survive like any other living form. When a tree feels stressed that it's not going to survive, it does certain things to make sure that there's future generations. So in case there's an apocalypse, it's still going to be alive. For instance, last year we had a very dry summer. One of the driest summers and right through the fall that we all have been through. There's a tremendous amount of pine cones everywhere I go. I'm sure you all have seen that too. That was because white pines said, hey, I might dry out and die. I need to make sure that I can spread more youngins so that way I can continue my heritage. And that's why there was more pine cones this year than last year than the years before, okay? Your pear is saying, I'm not healthy. Maybe there's something happening under the ground. Maybe there's something happening up above, but I want to be able to shoot a sucker from the base, because if the top of me dies, I can continue to pass on some growth and still survive in some way, shape, or form. So that would be something you'd kind of have to look at the site, Lisa, and say, okay, what's going on around there that's causing this? Especially where it's mature. Maybe there's a lot of competition, maybe the droughts from the summer, maybe winters, and pears are not a long-lived tree. That's one of the disadvantages of pears. Some people think trees should live forever, and that's true. If you're a ginkgo or a beech, absolutely, or an oak. But pears are not intended to live long in the life of how other trees live. And so it may be a situation where it's just outgrown its time. I can't say that for sure without looking at it, but that's a possibility.
Okay, all right. No, it's like 22 years old and it's on the corner of the house, far enough that it's not close to the house at all. But I'm noticing that when I mulch and are in that planting bed, I'm seeing these baby trees coming up, and they're probably about 3 to 4 feet away from the trunk of the tree.
Okay, so those are,
At least
yep,
3 of them.
Yep.
So I keep cutting them back to, to stop that growth, but I'm wondering, should I do more to really stop it?
so I would definitely cut them and then apply that sucker punch, and that will start, well, that will slow it down. So, you're seeing a lot of sucker growth due to the fact that there's, stress in the area. And it's going to continue to happen. It may not happen as quickly if you use the sucker punch, but yeah, that is just it's 22 years old,
Yes. No, it's a beautiful looking tree, and it's going to be a hard thing to miss because it's an anchor of the side of the house.
Yeah.
But it's only surrounded by azaleas, so I can't say that anything else should be giving it too much competition. But just want to see it last as long as it can. So I will definitely use that product and try to slow it down.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, the
Thank
next
you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Next question, Melissa.
Pruning 9 bark, question mark. My husband wants to cut it down to the ground every fall.
Janice, are you throwing your husband under the bus? Is that why you threw his name out there? So pruning 9 bark, if you prune it now, and yes, you could cut it to the ground. You could cut it, 6 or 8 inches off the ground. It's just going to come back. It's a very vigorous plant. It's multi-stemmed. The issue is you're going to lose the flowers, and that's something that you don't really care about. Why does he want to cut it to the ground every fall? Just to size it up or what have you? I mean,
he insists that he heard that was the proper thing to do with a 9 bark, that's the correct way to prune it. And I've been trying to get him to say, wait a minute, I'm saying you don't cut the whole thing back, you selectively prune, and then we have a discussion about what time of the year should that happen. It has come back when he's chopped it all the way down. But what I find now is that there's a lot of really thick, stubby branches at the base, and it's kind of tangled up at the base with a lot of stuff going on. And then it'll, anyway, I think it's losing, it doesn't look as lovely in the terms of its form as it could.
well, if it doesn't have good form, then if somebody said to me, I have a 9 bark that just doesn't have good form, it's kind of leggy. What I would do is I would prune it back to like a couple feet off the ground or a foot off the ground, and then thin it out so that you could encourage it to fill in with some younger growth. And then the next year you should see even more new growth, and then you're going to see a fuller plant because of that. But that would be just to kind of recover it and get it back to looking like something that it needs to. If you've got a lot of thick branches, maybe you just need to prune those out. The best time just as a general haircut would be after it flowers. So that would be late spring, early summer, sometime in June, let's say, and then it will flush out with some more growth, and then the flower buds will set on that growth for next spring.
All right, but he actually isn't wrong then that you could just hack it back to the ground every year.
Yeah, I think the ground is a little excessive, maybe a foot or 2 off the ground. If it depends what variety of 9 bark you have. Some want to grow 3 to 4 foot tall, and some want to grow 6 or 8 foot tall. What size do you want it to grow to, too, as well?
Yeah, that's true.
So let's say you want it to grow 6 foot tall because you want to screen or block something. You really want it to be full. Cutting it to the ground is just going to set it back. It's never going to get to that. If you cut it back a third each year, then you would definitely still allow it to grow and still encourage it to be full.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Janice.
Okay, next question. Does a butterfly bush get pruned like a deciduous shrub or like a grass plant down to 1 to 2 feet each winter?
That's a good question, Matt. In fact, I didn't really talk about grasses as well, so I'll mention that at the same time. So butterfly bush should be pruned in the springtime. You want to wait and see what's swelling on the stems. Sometimes there's winter dieback, so you're going to prune out the dead branches. You're going to take and prune back the branches to a foot or two each year, so that way it will start from the ground and fill in. And that's something I would wait until the springtime to do. I wouldn't do it until it starts showing some life, so you know what made it through the winter and what didn't. As far as the ornamental grasses, people ask the question, when do I prune ornamental grasses? The best time to prune it is when it's dormant. So that would be any time from late November through now. And there's no wrong answer here. You could wait and prune it in the springtime, or you could prune it before well before the spring and say November or December. You don't want to prune it in October or even November if there's still life in the stems. But as soon as the stems are brown, it's safe to prune it because it's gone into dormancy. So if you like the idea of the winter interest of the stems through the winter, creating a kind of winter silhouette and attractiveness in your garden, leave the branches there and just cut them back in the spring. If you don't like the fact that when the snow gets into them and splits them open, and then the branches break off and have like a tumbleweed effect where they're blowing around your yard, then prune them off in November or December so you don't have to deal with that. Totally right answer either way.
All right, very helpful.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question. The grass plants, I did do those in November. I also did the butterfly bush at the same time. Big mistake.
You don't know what the winter's going to be like, and so there's nothing you can do. But let's say that there was 3 branches on one side of the plant, and you wait until April, and you see that 2 branches died and 1 is alive. So you know you have to prune off the 2 dead ones because they didn't make it, and at least you have that 1 life one. Now, last year, if you had cut all 3 of them back, you might now have a situation where you don't know which one is alive and which one's dead. And you could have removed the one that would have been alive, so you don't know. So that's why it's better to wait and see what makes it and what doesn't.
All right. It's been a great session too. Thanks a lot, Jim.
You're welcome, Matt. Anytime. Glad to hear.
Okay. Next one is a goodie. How to prune climbing roses.
So climbing roses are usually on a vine, a trellis or a pergola or a fence of some structure. And if you want to reduce the size of the plant because it's overgrown, you can prune it back hard. When I say hard, like a foot or 2 off the ground, and it's just going to start all over again, just like the first day you planted it. If you want to just prune it back to kind of fatten it up, I would go no more than 50%. And wherever you prune it back to, that's where it's going to start growing, and it's going to continue to grow through the summertime and flower and form more growth and flower and form more growth as often as it can up to the frost. There's more flowers that are going to form on younger growth than on older growth. So the key is to prune some of the older growth back so you can encourage younger growth to form, and you get more flowers because of that. Did that answer your question, Eileen?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. You're welcome.
Okay. Next question. Can you put, oh, no, we already got that one. The Hinoki, Annie Hale, did you get your Hinoki cypress questions answered already? Are you comfortable with the questions that Jim answered before? Do you need more info?
A little more info. I have some branches that are headed sideways, a little bit. They're not too big, but I wonder if I can cut it a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Annie. You can cut it back.
Even a little more than the new growth, a little bit into the old growth?
As long as there still is existing growth remaining, yes. If you cut back and there's no foliage behind that, then no.
Okay, great, wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're good.
Excellent. All right, next question.
Next question. I have a dwarf spruce that is nice up on top, but is developing bare spots at the bottom. Will pruning the dead spots help?
This is actually a very good question. So on all needle evergreens like pines and spruces and arborvitaes and anything that's a needle, juniper, they do not push out new growth like a deciduous plant off the older wood. And the reason why a lot of evergreens that lose some of their growth on the bottom is because the top shades out the bottom. In the process, it starts losing needles. And so you need to understand that there's no way that it's going to recover from that situation outside of getting more sunlight down there. And typically the top shading the bottom is not going to have that ability to produce growth. A lot of times the solution in the planting is maybe to plant other shrubs underneath there that would fill that ground level to that lower branch level, so that you're not looking at the bareness of that plant, i.e. a rhododendron that's planted underneath a hemlock or a pine, so that you've got some growth from the ground to 4 feet off the ground with the rhododendron, and where the evergreens lost its growth at 4 feet and below 4 feet, you still have that foliage to fill in that void. If there's any kind of brown branches or dead spots on the bottom, it's just almost impossible for that plant to really fill in. You can prune sometimes some of the new growth back, and it might push a little bit of new growth behind it, but if you don't have any growth there, then you're not going to see anything. Did that answer your question, Linda?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Excellent.
Okay. Brad B is up next. Beach plum, lots of suckers, spectacular blossoms, zero fruit. I like that, Brad. You wrote in the haiku.
Full sun is what it needs, Brad. Is it getting full sun?
It does have full sun, actually, and there's 3 or 4 bushes. They've been there about 5 years. They've grown, I fertilized them with polytone. They've grown spectacularly, but they don't produce any fruit.
Interesting. Are you getting any pollinators in the area to help pollinate them?
It's hard to say. Last year I did see honey, I did see bees there. They weren't totally buzzing, but there definitely were some there, yes.
Sometimes, like the beach plum blooms early. Sometimes it's in flower when the weather is not that warm and the bees aren't always out. So it could be a situation with that. But you should have some fruit.
Yeah, this happened 3 or 4 years in a row. Somebody actually told me that one farmer here said that I live on the Cape. He said that at one point beach plums were developed in the 30s for just erosion control, and they weren't really bred for fruit. And I might have gotten some of those, but I bought these at a nursery, so I'm assuming they were planned for fruit.
Yeah, the beach plum is definitely it's a native plant for that reason. It's in full sun.
Well, it's under some very tall trees, but it definitely gets full sun. They get a lot of sun.
Okay. Well, maybe the existing trees that are there are also competing with them, and that's why they're not getting the fruit.
Yeah, they're pretty far away. I think they get.
Okay.
I think it gets enough sun. I just wonder if I over fertilize. As I said, they have lots of suckers and lots of branches. I mean, they've grown. I planted them. They're maybe a foot tall, and now they're 6 to 8 feet tall. And maybe they're just too big.
No, it's not that. Fertilizer will actually encourage fruit, but you would want to use something that's high in phosphorus. So you'd want to use like triple phosphate or some kind of organic product that has phosphorus in it. So that way it encourages more root production and then fruit production from that.
They're sort of in some locusts. So the locusts are they're very tall and have sort of minimal leaves at the top. So they get sun. They get sun. So I'll try the phosphorus. That's a possibility. I don't know.
And I might even suggest putting a little lime in the soil to help the phosphorus that's there already in your soil be more readily available. When phosphorus is already in the soil, in most cases, it doesn't become available to the roots of plants if the pH is too acidic. And that would be the case here possibly. And so maybe adding a little bit of lime to sweeten the soil that will allow the exchange between the phosphorus and the roots.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've mulched them with some, ground up leaves from my yard. And so maybe it is too acidic.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we are on to red and yellow dogwood pruning.
So Helen, when you have a dogwood, you you can prune that pretty much any time of the year. You can prune that as far back as you want. You can prune it to a foot off the ground and it will just blush out with all new stems. And then you want to do that pruning like I showed, where it's like a 3-step pruning, where you prune it back a third, you thin it out a third, and then it blushes out with new growth. It blushes new growth on the top. And then over time, you're going to have that plant looking beautiful again. Did that answer your question, Helen?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, pruning a rhododendron. Do you take the entire branch out or can you just reduce it by a third?
Hey, Laurie, I answered a question about this already. Did you get answered or do I need to elaborate more?
No, I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about that. I think I know the answer, but because are you saying that if it has growth farther down the branch, you can cut back, but if it doesn't, then it won't
You,
out again?
right. You can cut back a rhododendron to where there's no new growth, but you're not going to see the plant recover quickly. It's better to have some growth there so that it has some place to start its recovery from. If you started to cut back below that and there was just a bare stem, it may leaf out, but it will take its time to do that. And it's a May, so it may not too.
Okay. And I just had another question. So with a bridal veil spirea, I could cut that back now, right?
If you cut that back now, you'll lose the flowers.
Oh.
So that that's a good question, because there's two, if you will, families of spirea. There's the summer blooming spireas like Little Princess and Gold Flame and Gold Mom. And then there's the bridal veil spirea, and the bridal veil blooms on its old wood. The others bloom on their new wood. So that's a good question, because I didn't want to make the wrong assumption. If you prune that now, you would cut off the flowers. So you really have to wait till after it blooms to do any pruning if you just want to size it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for suggesting that too.
Folks, it is 2:25 and I don't know if we're going to have time to get to all your questions. And I think if we don't, the best thing to do is I can forward them all to Jim, but I don't know how we'd get them all back to you if I don't have emails. So if we don't get to your question, send either Jim an email directly at the email address you see right there, or you can send it through Zoom or to me at melissaf@Weston Nurseries, MELISSAF@westonnurseries.com, and we'll make sure to get them back. The other thing I want to recommend is we send out a weekly email that has lots of information in it. And you can always write back if you have more questions based on that. And we also have the Ask the Experts on the website and on Thursday nights. So next question is, we have a large fungus that appears every spring on our oak tree in the same location the branch once existed, but it falls off and is mushroom-like. Is it harmful to the tree, and should they do anything specific?
I can't really answer that, Lisa, without actually seeing what it looks like, to be honest. So if you have a picture of that, I could, and want to email me, I could certainly give you more information. There are funguses that are rotting funguses on dead wood. If that's the case, it's a dead branch or a dead part of the tree that's not helpful for the tree, then it needs to be removed. If it's like a mushroom that you might see on the lawn, it may be just a mushroom because it's wet around there and it's not harmful to the tree. But there are mushroom-like fruiting forms that are part of the wood decay process, just like if you had a pile of logs sitting in your lawn or to the side in your woods and you saw some kind of white, kind of mushroomy, fungusy growth that appears on it. And that's because as the stump is decaying, it's putting off a certain element that the fungus is attracted to and growing off of.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll send you a photo. It's way up high and it looks like a brain normally, and then it falls to the ground and we're like, oh, it's just like a giant mushroom. It's so odd. So it's forming now. I'll shoot you a photo when it gets a little bigger. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Can you please share the fertilizing time frame slide for holiday schedule? Did you have a fertilizing slide?
Yep.
Okay.
Hold on. So flowering plants 3 times a year, usually around Easter, Memorial Day, and Labor Day. Non-flowering plants 2 times a year, sometime in the spring, sometime in the fall.
Alrighty. Okay, hopefully Rajesh has had time to look. All right. Oh, advice on when and how to prune a well-placed summer sweet.
Summer sweet produces its flowers on new growth, so now's the time to prune it so that way you can get the flowers still to form. Did that answer your questions, Jay Dan?
Oh, we might have lost them. Okay, next person. I purchased a 3-foot weeping Japanese maple in winter of 2019 at a significant split in the main trunk. From the top, they had to bolt join the split to keep it standing and patched it with green Swiss wax. It did okay last year, as you mentioned, to prevent disease. Do I need to do any pruning or repair this spring? Oh, interesting question.
What was that type of plant again, Melissa? I'm sorry. I don't have that question here.
Hold on one second. It is a 3-foot weeping Japanese maple.
Oh, yeah. So that goes back to the slide I showed earlier where you have to prune it off, but you decided to keep it and it's coming back. Rot is starting to form on the inside of that tree. So it may or may not recover. It's hard to say. What is the customer looking to do for the person?
They want to know if they need to prune it or do anything to it to keep it alive this spring.
Well, if you really should have pruned it off before below that split instead of keeping the tape together. So
this is Yazad. I think I had this question. It was in the main trunk, so I didn't have any chance to prune. So I was told that you can just bolt it. I tried to talk with somebody at Weston only, and they said just do that. And so I repaired it. It went okay last year, but I'm wondering, like, do I have to rewax it again, or will the callus form again on it?
Well, the callus will start forming right away, so it shouldn't need to be rewaxed again. But if you have a lot of branches that are towards that upper part of the tree, you might want to thin out some of those before the fall so that you don't have so much top heaviness to snow impacting it, because it's kind of like a rebroken arm, if you will, or a leg. It's never 100%, and you don't want to put all that pressure and stress on that arm and all of a sudden have it snap again. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question. Do some plants sucker even though they're healthy? I've got a stoplight Lilacs, and I don't know if I said that right, sorry, that has tons of berries every year, but annually has lots of additional stems from the ground.
Some plants sucker more than others. Like lilacs will do that. It's just inherited in it, and it's just doing it. And it may still be healthy. It's just the nature of the plant. Some plants, like summer sweet, clethra, it produces growth off of its roots. It's just that's the name of the way it grows. It's a really good plant, in fact, if you want to fill in an area, especially like a moist soil, because it likes that. So those types of plants tend to be fine. Stoplight ilex is another plant that may do that because it's in the Verticillata family. So it's just natural for it to do that. I wouldn't worry about that as well. It's just a happy plant. It's just the way it is. So these are native plants that tend to repopulate and grow in moist areas, like a vernal pond might be near it, or a river or stream, and that's the way they grow.
Okay, the next question, Clematis Pruning. Someone has an autumn Clematis, Karen, that looks like a giant cousin it. Oh, that's interesting.
So there's different types of clematis, and some need to be pruned in the springtime. Some need to be pruned after they flower. So you have to know the variety. Sweet autumn clematis, you'd actually do want to prune in the springtime. You want to prune it to about, say, 8 or 10 inches off the ground. Let me rephrase. You can cut it back to 8 or 10 inches off the ground. You don't have to go that far back. You could go to 2 or 3 feet. It depends on where you want that recovery to start at. If it's 6 foot tall and you want to bring it back to fatten it up, you wouldn't want to necessarily go to 1 foot off the ground. It might be 2 or 3 feet off the ground. So it's all depending upon the size of the vine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How and when to prune Forsythia?
If you're looking to prune the Forsythia to keep it at a certain size, you would wait till after it flowers. If you're just looking to make it recover and fill in, you could do it right now. You may lose some flowers, but in the end, at the end of the day, you're going to get a fuller plant in the future. So you want to prune those crossing multiple stems. So if you have 12 branches coming out, maybe prune out 3 or 4 of them, and then prune back a third of the plant, and that will encourage much more younger growth to form. Okay, next.
Are you supposed to fertilize arborvitae? And if yes, when should it be done? And you've gotten a lot of compliments and thank yous, and I'm sorry I haven't read them out loud.
Well, thank you. Tree tone or holly tone would be the products to use for the arborvitae, and I would do it in the spring and in the fall. So anytime now or through May, and then sometime after Labor Day. Okay, next.
All right. Marie wants to know how and when she should prune her lilacs. She hasn't touched them in 6 to 10 years.
So lilacs don't push out growth as quickly as like a forsythia or a privet hedge. So you can prune it after it flowers if you want to, thin it out and cut it back. But it's going to take a couple of years for it to come back and fill in. And you're not going to see that plant flowering as much the next couple of years because you're pruning it. But it can be done. If you want to stop pruning now, you could even prune now and sacrifice this year's flowers so that it goes more focus into new growth and then future flowers. But I would do that same process where, cut out a third, cut back a third, and then let it grow this year. Any other questions?
No, this is the last one.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Amazing job.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Tomorrow, I'm doing a presentation at 10 o'clock on new plants, and at some point, I'll do the hydrangea talk again. I'm not sure when, though.
Perfect.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.